we're diving into some pretty tough realities today, you know?
Yeah.
Looking at what it's like to be an American mom facing some really serious challenges.
Yeah.
You guys shared this firsthand account with us, and it's a story that's both deeply moving and honestly a bit shocking.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how her story kind of connects to um, those broader social and economic trends that we're seeing, across the country.
It's like her story becomes a window into so many families' lives.
Right.
So we're talking about a mom with 3 kids, one with mobility issues who needs a wheelchair, another with autism, and she's also expecting a new baby.
Wow.
The demands on her time are just huge, and working a traditional job is just not an option for her right now.
Yeah, and that's a major obstacle for a lot of families. Accessible and affordable childcare is often lacking, especially for children with disabilities who may need, specialized care.
And you see in her account she's receiving $400 a month in SNP benefits, which is supposed to help with food, but that works out to about $13 a day to feed a family of 4,
Right.
which is significantly less than what the USDA says is the average cost of food.
It's no wonder she talks about the constant anxiety of just affording basic groceries, milk, eggs, diapers, those essential items that most of us don't even think twice about.
Exactly. And that's where you start to see these really creative ways that she's stretching her budget. She talks about watering down the milk to make it last longer, boiling tap water to avoid buying bottled water, even repurposing old bed sheets into toilet paper,
Wow.
which is,
It's resourceful,
yeah.
but it also kind of highlights the difficult choices a lot of families have to make when they're facing food insecurity. And her story also really shows just how much people are relying on food banks all across the U.S.
She even talks about having to arrive at the food bank by 5 a.m. to make sure she gets the items that they need most.
Wow.
Can you talk a little bit more about what's happening with food banks and how they fit into this bigger picture of food insecurity?
Sure, food banks are often a vital safety net, but they're also a symptom of a much bigger problem.
Right.
The number of Americans relying on food banks has been steadily increasing.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not just individuals experiencing homelessness. We're seeing more and more working families, seniors, and people with disabilities having to turn to food banks just to make ends meet.
And she's definitely not passively waiting for things to get better.
Right.
She's applying for part-time work at grocery stores, hoping to squeeze in some extra hours, even with her really demanding schedule.
It's admirable, but it also speaks to the limitations of a lot of those entry-level jobs
Mhm.
that offer very little flexibility juggling childcare and, therapy appointments while trying to meet the rigid schedules of, part-time positions
Yeah.
can be incredibly challenging, if not impossible.
Yeah, and it's not just about finding work. It's about managing every single expense she mentions, unplugging all the electronics at night just to shave a few cents off of the electric bill.
Right.
It makes you realize how energy costs can really impact families like hers.
Energy affordability is a growing concern, especially for low-income households. When a huge chunk of your income is going toward just keeping the lights on heating your home, it leaves even less for other essentials like food and healthcare.
And then you think about the emotional weight of all of this. It's not just about, the material lack. It's the feeling of never having enough, the constant stress, the toll it takes on your mental well-being. She mentions this dream of one day owning a house with ramps for her son's wheelchair.
Yeah, that dream really speaks to the accessibility challenges that people with disabilities and their families face. It's not just about, physical access. It's about feeling included and fully participating in society. Something as simple as a ramp can make a huge difference in terms of independence and quality of life.
And it's interesting, she talks about having worked as a nurse before having kids, and it makes you wonder how many skilled professionals are out there who are unable to use their skills because the demands of caregiving are just too much.
There's a real economic impact to this, too. We need to consider the lost earning potential. When caregivers, often women, are forced to step back from their careers, it's a loss for them personally, but also for the economy as a whole.
She also mentions this hope that one day food prices will stabilize and the government might offer more support to families like hers.
Right.
It's like she's holding on to this hope for a future where things are just a little bit easier.
These hopes and dreams are so relatable, and they point to the larger systemic issues at play here when we talk about affordable housing, disability rights, and living wages. We're talking about policies that could directly impact the lives of families like this one.
And it's not just about big policy changes, it's also about the small things, too.
Right.
She mentions wanting to be able to buy strawberries without having to check the price 5 times.
Wow.
It's such a simple desire,
Right.
but it speaks volumes about the constant mental calculations that come with living on a tight budget.
Right. It highlights the emotional toll of financial insecurity. It's not just about the material lack. It's the constant worry, the feeling of being deprived, and the impact it has on your sense of well-being.
And then just as you think it can't get any more intense, she shares that her daughter's seizure medication is running low and she's hoping the food bank might have some.
This is where you see how interconnected these issues really are. The fact that she's relying on a food bank for essential medication speaks volumes about the fragmented safety net in the U.S. Access to healthcare and food security are often intertwined, especially for families struggling to make ends meet.
What strikes you most about this detail, the fact that medication is even a question mark in this situation?
It's a stark reminder that for many families, essential medications are just unaffordable, even with insurance. The high cost of prescription drugs in the U.S. is a major barrier to healthcare access, and it's something that desperately needs to be addressed. It really makes you think about the trade-offs families like this have to make like every single day and the long-term consequences, especially for the kids.
Yeah, it's heartbreaking, but there's also this amazing resilience that comes through in her story. She's clearly a fighter, advocating for her kids, and just doing everything she can to give them the best life possible.
Absolutely. Her resourcefulness and determination are truly inspiring. It really challenges those harmful stereotypes about people experiencing poverty,
Yeah.
showing the incredible strength and agency that exist even when facing adversity.
You mentioned earlier the lost earning potential when someone has to leave their career to become a full-time caregiver. What are some of the bigger economic implications of that, both for the individual and for society?
It's a significant issue. Not only does it impact, the individual's financial stability and their long-term earning potential, but it also represents a loss of really valuable skills and experience from the workforce. Unpaid care work, often performed by women, is a massive contribution to society, but it's rarely recognized or valued in economic terms.
Right. It makes you wonder how our economy would look if we had better support systems in place for caregivers, like affordable childcare, paid family leave, flexible work arrangements. Those could make a big difference.
Absolutely. Investing in those support systems would not only benefit families directly, but would also strengthen the economy as a whole. When caregivers have the support they need, they're better able to participate in the workforce and contribute their talents and skills.
She also mentioned wanting to move to a house with ramps, highlighting the accessibility challenges for her son. Can you talk a bit more about inclusive design and how it relates to creating a more accessible society for people with disabilities?
Yeah, inclusive design is about creating environments and products that are usable by everyone, regardless of their abilities. It goes beyond simply adding ramps or elevators. It's about considering the needs of people with diverse abilities from the very start of the design process.
Oh, I see.
For example, doorways that are wide enough for wheelchairs, clear signage with Braille websites that are easy to use for people with visual impairments,
Yeah.
things like that.
So it's about making sure that everyone can fully participate in society, not just physically, but also socially and economically.
Exactly. When we create a truly inclusive society, everyone benefits. We unlock the potential of all individuals, regardless of their abilities, and create a richer, more vibrant society for everyone.
There's another point in her story that I keep coming back to her desire to one day buy strawberries without having to check the price tag 5 times.
Yeah, it's such a small detail, but it's so powerful. It really speaks to the psychological burden of poverty, that constant stress of having to make every dollar stretch, the feeling of being denied those simple pleasures. It takes a real toll on your well-being.
It's like poverty becomes this invisible barrier preventing people from those little moments of joy and spontaneity that many of us just take for granted.
And it's often those small moments that make life worth living. When you're constantly worried about just making ends meet, it's hard to allow yourself those moments of joy. It's like a weight is always pressing down on you.
She also touched on the need for more government support for families in her situation. What are some of the key policy areas that you think could make a real difference in addressing the challenges that these low-income families are facing?
Well, there are several key areas where policy changes could have a significant impact. Increasing the minimum wage to a living wage would make sure that working families can afford those basic necessities. Expanding access to affordable housing would reduce the burden of housing costs and free up more income for other essential things. And strengthening the social safety net, including programs like SNAP and TNF, would provide a stronger safety net for those families facing hardship.
And we can't forget about healthcare. The fact that she's relying on a food bank for her daughter's seizure medication is a clear indication that our healthcare system is failing so many families.
Absolutely. Expanding access to affordable quality healthcare is essential, and that includes addressing the high cost of prescription drugs, which is a major barrier for a lot of families.
It's also about making sure that healthcare is truly accessible, not just in terms of cost, but also in terms of location and availability.
Right, we need to consider the needs of rural communities, people with disabilities, and other underserved populations that often face huge barriers to accessing healthcare.
It feels like we're talking about big systemic changes here. Changes that require a shift in how we as a society think about poverty and inequality.
That's exactly right. We need to move beyond that individualistic mindset that blames people for their circumstances and instead recognize those systemic factors that contribute to poverty. It's about creating a society where everyone has the opportunity to thrive regardless of their background or circumstances.
I think this mom's story is a powerful reminder that behind the statistics and policy debates, there are real people, real families, real lives being impacted. Her story is a call to action, a plea for empathy and understanding.
It's a reminder that we're all interconnected. The well-being of our society depends on the well-being of all its members. When one person struggles, we all struggle. And when we create a more just and equitable society, we all benefit.
It can feel a little overwhelming, right? All these issues and just the scale of the challenges.
It's true. It is a lot to think about.
It kind of makes you wonder, like, where do we even begin to, tackle something this big?
Well, I think it starts with kind of a shift in perspective, like moving away from this idea that poverty is an individual's fault and recognizing those systemic factors at play, like the lack of affordable housing or access to quality education and, jobs that pay a living wage. It's all connected.
Yeah, and that seems to be a key takeaway from her story, right? It's not that she's not trying. She's incredibly resourceful, and you can tell how determined she is.
Exactly. She is doing everything she can to take care of her kids, but she's up against these systemic barriers that make it so hard to break that cycle of poverty.
We talked about the importance of, policy changes, but for those of us who want to help on a more individual level, what can we do in our own communities to make a difference?
There's a lot we can do.
Sure.
Like volunteering our time at organizations that support families in need. That's a great place to start. Food banks, homeless shelters, after-school programs, they all need volunteers.
She mentioned having to rely on food banks herself, and it's inspiring to think about all the people who donate to those food banks, who are making it possible for families to get those basic necessities.
Yeah, food banks are so important, but they're a symptom of this bigger problem. Not the solution. They shouldn't be the main source of food for so many families, but until we, really deal with the root causes of food insecurity, they're a crucial lifeline.
Right, and it's not just about giving material support. It's also about, showing compassion and understanding, treating everyone with dignity and respect no matter their situation.
Absolutely. We need to get rid of the stigma around poverty and, recognize that shared humanity that connects us all. We're all in this together.
Yeah. This mom's story really shows the power of community, the way she talks about the food bank. It's clear that it's more than just a place to get food. It's a place where she feels supported and like she belongs.
Yeah, community can be so powerful. It gives people hope and helps them to be more resilient when things are tough. It connects people with resources, offers emotional support, and creates a sense of purpose. We're all working together.
And that kind of brings us back to that idea of, changing our mindset, moving away from blaming the victim and towards, being more compassionate and understanding.
It's about understanding that we all have a part to play in making a more just and equal society, whether it's through what we do every day, supporting those organizations that are doing good work or advocating for policy changes. We all can do something.
It's pretty inspiring to think that even small things can make a difference. Donating to a food bank or volunteering sometime can really impact someone's life.
And when we all do our part, all those small actions can turn into something really big. It's about creating a movement, a real collective effort to, address those systemic issues that keep poverty and inequality going.
This has been quite a journey, this deep dive into the realities for this mom and all the other families like hers.
Yeah, it's a story that sticks with you. Her strength, her resilience, her love for her kids. It's a powerful reminder that even when facing huge challenges, the human spirit can still endure and even find a way to thrive.
And her story challenges us to do better, to be more compassionate, more engaged, more willing to fight for a world where everyone has a chance to succeed.
It's a call to action, a call to recognize how interconnected we all are, to be more empathetic and to work together to create a more just and fair world for everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you found it, insightful and that it gave you something to think about.
Remember, change is possible. It starts with each of us. Let's work to make this mom's dream of a better future a reality for every family out there.